Hello, I am not Joel Franklin, I'm Kaylee Hanlon, and welcome to today's JLG webinar series, Get to Know Spring's Hottest Debut Authors and Illustrators. From YA author A.S. King's debut title for middle grade to a National Geographic explorer, the class of 2017 is as varied as their work. Today we welcome Carl Harvey to our webcast series. Carl is no stranger to new children's books, as he is a former member of the Caldecott Committee, among his many other accomplishments. Please join the conversation on Twitter, tweet us at JR Library Guild, or hashtag JLG Webinars. If you have any questions or comments, send those in at any time via the red Q&A box. So Deb, A.S. King published a novel for middle grade?
She did. For those of you who know A.S. King, she needs no introduction, and she's certainly not a debut author, but she had a story that she thought was for middle grades. And so she and the publisher decided to rebrand her identity as Amy Sarig King, and so now everybody knows what the A.S. stands for. But our beloved A.S. King, who's Prince Honor winner, author of many titles, including last fall's Still Life with a Tornado, has a story for middle grades, Me and Marvin Gardens. It's a really interesting story. And everybody I've talked to who has seen an advanced copy, that's pretty much what they say. It's really interesting. And there's nothing else really like it. It starts like this. Chapter 1, Nosebleeds and Mosquitoes. There were mosquitoes. There are always mosquitoes at Devlin Creek this time of year. Every time I went inside, I had 20 more bites than I had the last time, and Mom made a noise as if it was my fault, as if I created mosquitoes. There was a bloody nose. It wasn't my first. I didn't have any tissues or napkins, and I was in a good T-shirt, so I lay on my front with my head out over the bank and let the blood drip into the creek. I wondered if the fish would smell it or taste it or breathe it. I knew by then that nosebleeds only lasted so long. I'd learned not to pinch my nose or tilt my head back 6 months ago. You just had to let it bleed until it was done. Most people got nosebleeds because something happened, like maybe they got hit with a baseball or walked into a door. I got nosebleeds for no reason. Or there was a reason. I just didn't like to talk about it. So this is a story about Obi and his nosebleeds and the reason behind them. But on top of that, he's a kid who lives in the country. He's a little bit different. He's not the most popular kid. He picks up trash around the creek. And one day when he's out there in the creek or by the creek, he sees an animal that is just not quite normal. It's not a stray cat. It's too early for frogs that big. Turtles are slower. It sounds bigger than a cat, though, but he's not sure what it is. It turns out to be an animal he's never seen before, an animal that eats plastic. So it's a story about the environment and about overbuilding. It's a story about bullies. You will love him and his family. Me and Marvin Gardens, and that's the name he gives the creature that he finds. Carl, did you play Monopoly as a kid?
No, can't say that I played Monopoly very often.
Oh, well, that's where all this Marvin Gardens stuff comes from, because he and his family play Monopoly. And if you're a Monopoly person, you'll see little Monopoly tokens on every chapter. I played Monopoly as a kid. One time, a game that was so long, we played for a month, and we came home one day from school, and her mother just came in and messed the whole game up because we've been playing the game too long. Go outside.
I just saw they were changing the tokens that are supposed to come with the game, too. So
yes, they
I just
are.
want to see what that looks like.
Yeah. And so that's our first debut, even though she doesn't really need an introduction. But speaking of people who would rather do something than just play a game, Carl, how about you tell us about your first book, about Keith Haring?
So I have Keith Haring, the boy who just kept drawing, and this is a picture book biography about the artist Keith Haring. You can see some of his iconic artwork right there on the cover. That was his style that he started, in the subways of New York City in the 1980s, and then just kept expanding and expanding out how to use that line to draw those characters, and it spread beyond the subways into galleries and all sorts of fancy places all over. But this book is written by his sister, Kay Herring, and when she was asked about why she wrote this book, she said it was because she always was asked what Keith was like as a kid. He did die of the AIDS epidemic in 1990 after starting the Keith Haring Foundation in 1989 that provides funding for AIDS organizations. And so he's been gone for quite a while, but she said he was always asked what he was like as a kid, and she said he was always drawing. And what she really wanted people to remember about her brother was his deep commitment to his community and his unending generosity. So even as his art was becoming worth tons of money and things, he was always figuring out how to help his community. And he was a very hard worker, and that's what drove her to create this book about him. And it's very colorful and tells a story of his art and is sharing it throughout the community, and certainly does a great job of sharing that story of who her brother really was. So that's kind of a quick overview of the Keith Haring biography.
Cool. And I added some stuff about Keith in the live binders. So when you go to look up the live binders, if you're new to us, we'll talk about live binders at the end of our fast presentation today. But I did find Keith Haring for Kids, where there are lesson plans and there's an online coloring book and some cool things like that.
Awesome.
Speaking of cool, See You in the Cosmos. This is Jack Chang, and this is his first book for kids. It's for our middle grades. With just 30 minutes, we are doing a couple of books for each interest level. So here's one for you middle school, middle grade librarian types and teachers. See You in the Cosmos is a story of a little boy named Alex. He's 11 years old, and he lives with his mom. His brother is some big agent star kind of guy down in L.A. He loves space. He loves his dog. His dog's name's Carl Sagan. So he and Carl Sagan are going to enter a contest where he's going to literally launch a rocket that he made all by himself. And so he gets on a bus, and he goes to New Mexico all by himself, this little 11-year-old kid, and has some adventures kind of along the way. But he gets there, and his rocket launch is not quite the success that he wanted it to be. And his journey back home is even more not like he expected. And so those of you who've heard me talk about last year in the blue cover books, here you go. This is another tissue book, and your clue is the blue on the cover, because last year's tissue books all were blue. Did you notice that, Carl?
Now that you say that, I do remember that, absolutely.
Yep. And so just see, when you see blue, there's a little bit of carryover from 2016. But, your heart will just fill with this little kid and the charm he has as he records all the adventures that he's having in his iPod and how he's going to launch it in space and the ups and downs of his life. Cool. Now, for our younger kids, Carl has a book.
So, Will You Help Doug Find His Dog? And obviously from the title, you can tell that Jane Kasten's book is all about trying to help Doug find his dog. And what's great about this book is it's one of those interactive books, so it really pulls the reader into the story as an active participant. And so as you go through each page, it starts off, there are tons of dogs on the page, and Doug through each page gives you some additional clues. So great for talking about adjectives and describing about your character, and different clues about his dog so we can help rule out some of the dogs. And as we rule out a dog, the author gives us some sort of interactive way to play with the illustrations to make those dogs that don't meet the criteria go away, so that hopefully by the time we get to the end of the book, if we're lucky, we can figure out where Doug's dog went. So just a fun read-aloud, interactive story that all kids can relate to, trying to help find a dog, and also just great describing words throughout it. So a wonderful chance to see whether Doug finds his dog.
And I won't give away the ending because I read the book too. Okay, The Hate You Give. I don't even know how to start this. Angie Thomas, bless her heart. This is her first book, and it's gotten starred in everything that reads it. Everything. All the journals. It launched at NYTimes #1 spot for young adult. And Angie is just over the moon. Her mama is running down the street. Can you believe this? You know, it's just amazing. I read just recently an interview that said she was kind of afraid to even give anybody the manuscript. She was afraid they wouldn't like it. And then there was a 13 publishing house bidding war, and Balzer and Bray won the rights to publish her book. So there you go. It's a story very much out of the news about a little girl, a 16-year-old girl named Star, and she is at a party where she sees a boy that she grew up with, Khalil, and there's a fight at the party, so they decide to get away before anything happens, and they're driving home, and a policeman pulls them over, and things go from bad to worse really quick, and the next thing you know, Khalil's been shot by the police officer, who's a white guy, and Khalil is a black guy. He was also unarmed. And so the community is in an uproar, and everybody wants to know what happened. And, of course, Star is the only one who knows exactly what happened, but she's afraid. And she also is living in kind of two worlds because she goes to a prep school. Well, things are very, very different, but she lives in the projects where gang violence and shooting and things like that are an everyday occurrence, and she's been kind of walking the border between those two worlds, and all of a sudden the two worlds kind of collide. It is absolutely amazing, and so for our young adult readers, everybody ought to have this, and certainly it's going to make a great book club discussion book. So I hope that if you haven't read it already, you should put that on your wish list for sure. And Angie was raised in Mississippi, but she's a former teen rapper. That's what she did before, and she won a scholarship through We Need Diverse Books, and that's how she was able to write and get the book published. So she's got a cool backstory too.
Wow, I just ordered that one the other day. I can't wait to try to get to read that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's very intense, but it's like it came right out of the headlines. It's amazing.
Well, the book's not
completely
quite as
different
intense.
from that.
Yeah, is Bob and Josh Get Lost. And I love the biography for the author, Peter McElbreeze, on the book because it says that he lives and works in Oregon and sometimes gets lost there too. And that's definitely ties in well to this book about Bob and Josh. Bob is bored, and so Josh is trying to come up with ideas to make him not quite so bored, and every idea that Josh comes up with seems to just kind of take them off onto a whole nother adventure. So the first one was out to a boat, and Bob was convinced they would get lost. Josh was like, no, it wouldn't happen. Well, of course it did, and the story just continues and continues from there, each adventure. Lots of great vocabulary in this book that will appeal as a read aloud. What's really kind of interesting, too, is the illustrations have incorporated longitude and latitude marks to tell you about their location. So I think that's an interesting twist that I don't really think I've seen in a book before. But towards the end, you then realize that while they may not have been quite as lost as they once thought. So just a great opposite two characters, different takes on life. One gets really worked up, one's very carefree and easygoing, and just how the two of them are good friends and how maybe they weren't quite as lost or bored as they thought they might have been.
And back to our young adult. Dun, 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 dun. I could only think about Star Wars when I was reading this. God bless Princess Leia and that whole crew. Empress of a Thousand Skies by Rota Bessa. And I would never have said it like that, but I heard actually a video this morning where she was talking about 5 things you should know about this book. And one of them is that one of the reasons why she wrote it is she wanted to have a brown girl heroine. And so she does. The Empress of this story is the Crown Princess Ree, and her main motivation at the beginning of the story is revenge on her family. Her whole family had been killed when she was a kid, blown up in a spaceship, and she's the only one left. And now that she's come of age, she's going to go back to her home planet, and be the Empress. But along the journey, there is someone she trusted no longer is trustworthy, and she has to escape by the skin of her teeth. And everybody thinks that she's dead. Of course, she is now in hiding. And the person that they think did the killing is a guy named Ali, who's a fugitive. He's a refugee from another planet where there was a war, and he used to be a big kind of movie star. He was he's been falsely accused by the whole of killing her, and so the two of them end up together and have to prove his innocence and save her. But everything that she has believed all her whole life is possibly not true. It's already been purchased for a movie. Amanda Steinberg from The Hunger Games is going to star in it. George Tillman is going to direct it. So look for the movie and I imagine a sequel.
Wow. Okay, well, speaking of books that will have sequels, this one is the first of a trilogy that's being written. This one is The Uncommoners is the trilogy name, and The Crooked Sixpence is the title. This is written by Jennifer Bell, who is from London, so it definitely has some little bit of British vocabulary throughout it once in a while to figure out, but quite an adventure story. The Ivy and Seb are the two main characters in this book, and they live with their grandmother, who has no memory of what happened to her. She was a child somewhere, maybe 10 or 11 in 1969, and there was some accident, and from that point forward, she has absolutely no memory of what had happened to her in the past. And so this book really kind of dives into figuring out what had happened in her past, and what the kids find is that she was part of a whole other world that was underground called Lumineer, and it's just quite a strange world. And in this world, has all these different, what we would call common objects. They call them uncommon because they do strange and different things. So, for example, a paper clip that becomes a set of handcuffs that you can't take off until somebody finds an eraser that allows you to erase them, and that's how you get the handcuffs off. So all sorts of uncommon type everyday item things that then have these superpowers in this Lumineer world. And as the book comes out, you learn more about Grandma and her past, and perhaps why she doesn't remember prior to 1969. And you also learn about some of the powers that some of these grandchildren of her have inherited, as far as being able to detect some of these uncommon objects and the powers that they have. And there's some villains throughout, lots of secret codes and things about how the world evolves, and then trying to piece together what happened in the past and how the story will go forward. So some thriller, some adventure, all wrapped into one, and I'm very excited to see what will happen with these characters in the next book. So this is The Uncommoners.
Yay. I loved it.
Yeah, I did too.
Magic. Was great. And I loved the change between the brother and sister too.
Yes, great relationship building throughout, absolutely.
Yeah, so many times the siblings, they don't click. So it's nice to see some siblings start to click.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's blue.
Uh-oh.
So what does that mean, everybody?
Time to get the tissues out again?
Time to get I had to put the book down. I couldn't see. I'm crying so hard. I love this book so much. It reminds me of Dicey's song and the Pictures of Hollis Woods, some of those. it's a story of a little girl named Ryder, and bless her heart, she's having a hard time. She's everybody that's caring for her has died, and her mom died of a drug overdose, and she goes to live with a grandma that would only in Phoenix that she doesn't want anything to do with her, and finally the grandma dies of cancer, and the next thing you know, Ryder is on an Amtrak train with a social services worker to watch her, and she's on her way to Chicago to meet some other old relative that she's never met, and you know that she doesn't feel good about herself. She doesn't like the way she looks or how she is. She's lost all hope. She blames herself for all kinds of things, but she meets people on this journey that you just will love. There's the guy who works down in the convenience store who's all the time slipping her some food because she doesn't have any and she doesn't want anybody to know. And there's this kid who's in a Boy Scouts that she strikes up a friendship with. And there's an old man who just wants to talk to her. And it's just so wonderful. It's a wonderful, wonderful story by Paul Mosier, who's actually had some tragedy. Well, let's don't say tragedy. He's having some, what's the word I want to use? Cause for hope in his own life. His 8-year-old daughter last year was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. And so shortly after that, he wrote a second book. So look for that. It's called Echo's Sister. I'm not sure when it's coming out. It might not come out till next year. But it's a story about how he's dealing with Harmony's cancer. So a man with great emotion is able to put that into his characters that will give you characters to love and clap your hands for. And like a Disney movie at the end, you're cheering and clapping and crying all at the same time. You'll love it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, a different type of adventure. This one is Danger on the Mountain by Gregg Trine, I think is how you say that. And this is a great nonfiction title. It is a chapter book, but it's written in a really just a wonderful, readable format that I think kids will enjoy. Gregg Trine is a biologist and so a scientist, but he's also an adventurous in that he has a foundation or a group, this company that he works for, that their job is to help scientists collect data from remote places that are dangerous to get to, so that maybe not every scientist is in the mood to climb this huge mountain to get the data that they need to study it. So his group that he works with, that's their job, in addition to his own type of scientist adventure. And so this book is great in that there are short little chapters, and each one kind of tells a story either from his childhood or growing up about how an adventure led to the personality that he has and led to the job that he has, and his curiosity and why he wanted to go out and work as a scientist, and great little blurbs next to the pictures of did you know, and great color images of some of his adventures, and I think kids will really connect to that adventurous spirit that he portrays in his book. And so just a great kind of almost biography type as well, I guess, a little bit, but certainly nonfiction, and certainly looking at all those different ways to be out there and exploring and finding the next great discovery. And so a great book that I think second through fourth graders are just going to love. Awesome.
And definitely not things that I would do.
No, would not be anything remotely close to anything I would do, I don't think.
No, that's too
I'll
much
read about it
adventure
instead.
for me. Absolutely. And this might be a good time for those of you who are unfamiliar with Junior Library Guild, and explain the category thing. So our editors in New York are amazing at picking the best books way before everybody else, and then they put them in these categories. And so this one is I's for independent readers, grades 2 to 4. And so you would get this category, and as the books are published, every month you would get the new books. So they're really great up in New York. Thanks, guys, for choosing amazing authors and and great books. And so one of the things that we do is we track all those great authors and illustrators on Pinterest. So follow us on Pinterest, where you can see more authors and illustrators. And then I also made a new board of debut authors and illustrators. For one reason, because this time is so short, and we only had time to do, a few K-6, a few middle school, and a few high school. But there are more than 30 already this first half of the year. A couple of the authors we've even already talked about. We did Hidden Figures and American Street last month. So we made this new debut board, and so as we find debut authors and illustrators, we will add them to our sites. So you can look at those as well. So follow them and you'll find out about the new guys. In addition to telling you about great books, remember that we're also creating resources to help you use the books. And I mentioned those, like with the Keith Haring. There's a great website. Most of these authors are so new, many of them don't even have a website yet, but you'll see Crooked Sixpence. Jennifer Bell's already shown us the cover of the next book, and I saw Chang. He has a podcast where he talks about his writing process, so you can go to the Live Finder and look for those.
And Jennifer has a great website, too, that I was playing on last night a little bit, so I'm sure that these debuts will have their websites up in no time would be my guess.
I think so, too. Remember that you can check our website after the webcast for the recap blog post. You'll find a list of all the books with links to their book detail pages and their other resources. Thanks, Kaylee, about that. And then you want to join us for our next webcast, which is April 25th at 3 o'clock Eastern, another 30 minutes. This one will be The Stars So Far with co-host Shelley Diaz, who's the reviews manager and the YA editor at School Library Journal. We're going to be talking about the titles that are getting the most rave reviews already this year, and this webcast is K-12, so everybody's going to want to attend that.
Thanks again to our special guest, Carl Harvey, for spending some time with us. And thanks to you, our listeners, for supporting these authors and illustrators with your time. For those of you that are attending live, please stick around for a brief survey. Please be sure to ask your account rep about all of our books and categories or contact our sales department for more information. Tomorrow you'll receive an automatic email regarding today's webinar. If you follow the link, you can watch the archived webinar and print your certificate of attendance after 10 minutes of viewing. Until next time, and thanks again for joining us, happy reading.